He kicked me in the head right there on the sidewalk outside his bakery, just because I was old, poor, and homeless. And behind him stood Sheila Branson, the self-proclaimed Queen of Main Street, holding her clipboard like a weapon, smiling like justice would never touch her. But that kick didn't just bruise my face, it awakened a fire in me. And when I stood back up, the entire city would follow. He kicked me in the head. Right there in front of the bakery window where warm loaves were steaming behind polished glass, and I was curled up on the cold sidewalk with nothing but my threadbare coat and a tin cup that hadn't seen a coin all day. His boot, shiny black expensive, came down like I was a pest. No warning, no words. Just the thud of polished leather cracking into my temple and the sound of my body slapping against the pavement. The fall split the side of my lip and I tasted blood. But what stung more wasn't the pain. It was the laughter from the people inside. That slow, muffled chuckle from the warm world I wasn't allowed into. "Get out of here, witch!" he snarled. "You're scaring the customers." Behind him stood Sheila Branson, the store owner, wearing her bright orange apron and fake pearls arms folded across her chest like a queen protecting her castle. She didn't say a word, just watched, her clipboard in one hand, her other tapping that fake wedding ring against the bakery door. And when I looked up, hoping for an ounce of decency, all I saw was triumph in her eyes. She liked watching me squirm. I am Edna May, and I am 74 years old. I sleep beside the dumpster behind the old theater on Parkside. I wear 3 coats when the wind bites, and I haven't had a hot meal in over a week. But once I had a house, a garden, a grandson who used to kiss my cheek every night. That was before the fire, before the bank, before the system decided I didn't belong. I don't like confrontation. I don't beg unless I have to. I sweep the sidewalk every morning in front of that bakery, hoping that maybe they'll let me sit in the corner for warmth. But that day, after the kick, I knew something had changed. The people on Main Street saw it. A crowd had gathered. Some turned away. Some whispered. But no one helped. That was when I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a spectacle, a threat, or maybe just a mirror they didn't want to see. Sheila Branson has owned Branson's Bakes for 12 years. She inherited it from her husband, God rest his cruel soul. She's proud, meticulous, and she hates anything that doesn't fit her catalog-perfect vision of this neighborhood. Homeless people, stray dogs, kids with backpacks too loud. Sheila calls them blemishes. She files complaints with the city like most people clip coupons. There's a code, she says. Order. Decency. I've heard her say it to the police. I've seen her bar people from her cafe for not saying thank you fast enough. And I've watched her push her authority like it was her birthright. Nobody elected her Queen of Main Street, but that never stopped her from acting like one. At first, it was little things. A warning sign posted right above where I slept, "No loitering." Then a call to the sanitation department claiming I left biohazards on the street. I'd clean up my space every morning with a rag I stole from the laundromat. I even stopped lighting candles in the cold, worried the smell would bother her. But then she put up the camera. A real security cam pointed not at the street but directly where I slept. Next came the rumors that I talked to myself that I scared children that I was using drugs. All lies. All designed to make people look away when she finally made her move. The kick wasn't just cruelty, it was her declaration. And when she stepped back into her bakery, brushed off her apron, and returned to slicing croissants, she did it knowing she'd get away with it. Because in this town, if you wear pearls and own property, people assume you're right. And if you're a wrinkled black woman with missing teeth and nowhere to go, they assume you're the problem. That night, I lay on the cold cement behind the alley, blood crusted on my temple. I didn't cry. I just stared up at the brick wall, the graffiti, the stars barely visible through the smog. I'd been hurt before, mugged, frozen, starved. But this felt different. This wasn't survival. This was humiliation. And something inside me, something buried under years of silence, started to rise. The next morning, I did what I always do. I stood, I brushed myself off, and I walked past the bakery again, not to beg, but to be seen. I stood straight. I looked every person in the eye. Some avoided me. Some looked guilty. And then a boy, maybe 16, held the door open for an old woman in a wheelchair. He glanced at me, then back at her. "You okay?" he asked softly. And I realized not everyone had looked away. Later that day, I went to the library. I hadn't stepped foot inside since they put up metal detectors. But the librarian, a tired woman with soft eyes, recognized me. "Need help?" she asked. "Yeah," I whispered. "I need a computer." I started reading. City codes, property rights, civil harassment laws. I watched videos of public hearings. I searched stories of others, people like me who'd fought back. I found a woman in Detroit who'd sued a coffee shop for throwing away her only blanket. Another man in Denver who forced a councilwoman to resign after filming her abuse. They had one thing in common: someone had seen them. Someone had helped. So I bought a disposable phone from the gas station using change I'd collected over weeks, and I started filming. Every interaction, every insult, every push. I found an old flip notebook and started writing down dates, times, faces. I talked to a lawyer at the church outreach center. He didn't laugh. He didn't promise miracles. But he gave me a number. The next morning I saw her again, Sheila Branson, out front, brushing leaves from her storefront with a gold-handled broom. She sneered at me. Still here, she hissed. I just smiled. "You bet," I said, and I tapped the phone in my coat pocket. They think we're weak. They think we're too old, too broken, too dirty to matter. But every storm starts with a whisper in the wind. Every earthquake starts with a tremble in the ground. And as I walked away from Branson's Bakes that day, I could feel the tremble begin. The bruises faded faster than the memory. But the silence that followed that was what I carried like a stone in my chest. For 3 days after the kick, no police showed up. No calls, no questions. It was as if the town had already decided I wasn't worth defending. Sheila Branson had returned to smiling behind her cash register, greeting customers with her sugary voice, while I limped to the library each morning, recording every piece of evidence I could gather. I was invisible again. But now I was watching. I slept with one eye open. Not just because I feared Sheila might call someone to sweep me out again, but because I had started to notice patterns. The way the city workers arrived, like clockwork, to hose down the sidewalks right after I settled into a spot. The way the garbage bins near me were suddenly locked. The way certain people would cross the street when they saw me, not out of fear, but shame. Some knew what had happened. They just didn't want to admit they'd seen it. One morning, I found a fresh smear of red paint on the sidewalk near my usual place. It read, "Scum doesn't belong here." I knew who had written it. Not directly, no. But this town doesn't act without permission. And Sheila Branson, she gave them all the permission they needed with a single glance. Still, I didn't wipe it off. I let it dry. I filmed it. I documented it all. I am not a hero. I never was. I used to be a seamstress once, back in South Carolina in a house with a porch and a husband who drank too much but still called me darlin' on good days. I raised 2 daughters, both of whom moved north and never looked back. I lost my home when medical bills swallowed our savings and then the fire took the rest. I drifted west, thinking maybe the sun would soften the world. It didn't. But here I was. And I was still standing. That week I visited the church outreach center again. I met a man named Reuben, tall, kind-eyed in his 50s. I saw the video, he said, softly. Someone posted it online. It's been shared a few times. My throat went dry. What video, I asked. He pulled out his phone. There I was, me, curled on the ground, Sheila's boot in the corner of the frame. It was grainy, filmed from a passerby's phone. But it was enough. You could hear the thud, the gasp from the crowd, the bakery in the background. It's real, he said. People are talking. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I had been seen. But then came fear. What would Sheila do when she found out? What would the city do? Would they come for me harder now? Try to silence me completely, Reuben saw it in my face. They don't scare easy people like her, he said. But neither do we. He invited me to a meeting, just a small group, he said. Neighbors, activists, people who cared. I almost didn't go. My pride kept me on the sidewalk. But something stronger, maybe the memory of my grandson, maybe the echo of that boot, pulled me through the door. It was a Tuesday evening. Rain misted the city like a whisper, and the church basement smelled like coffee and mold. But when I stepped inside, I saw eyes. Kind eyes, angry. Eyes, tired eyes, but none looked away. A woman named Gloria offered me a seat. We saw what happened, she said. You're not alone. There were 10 people that night. 10 strangers who in 1 hour became more family than anyone I'd known in years. One was a nurse who'd lost her job after speaking up about unsafe conditions. Another was a college kid who had been arrested for protesting a housing ordinance. They all had stories. And now I had mine. We made a plan. They called it strategic noise. Letters to the editor. Complaints to city council. Flyers. Hashtags. A campaign built not on pity, but on truth. Reuben said something I'll never forget. We don't ask for justice. We demand it publicly, loudly, relentlessly. And for the first time since the kick, I felt something stir in me again. Not just anger, not just shame, but purpose. The next day, I returned to Branson's Bakes. I stood at the same spot. This time, I held a sign. It was nothing fancy, just a piece of cardboard with 5 words, "She kicked me." Ask why. I didn't shout. I didn't move. I just stood. Customers walked past. Some sneered. Some turned away. But just a few stopped. One woman asked, "Is this about that video?" I nodded. Her lips tightened. "I've been going here for years," she said. "Not anymore." She turned and walked away. And just like that one crack in the fortress. That afternoon, a reporter came. Local news. Young, curious, skeptical. "Are you the woman from the footage?" she asked. I nodded. She asked me to speak on camera. My hands shook. My voice cracked. But I told the truth. All of it. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse. I just described what happened. What it felt like. What it meant. Sheila saw the interview later that night. I know because the next morning she didn't come to the bakery. Her assistant did. The door was locked until noon. People murmured. The tension was spreading. Then came the call from City Hall. A woman named Candace Young Black with a voice that meant business reached out. "We've received multiple complaints," she said. Would you be willing to give a statement? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, but I want it to be public. That night I dreamed of fire. But this time it wasn't consuming my house. It was lighting a torch. The day I gave my statement, I wore the cleanest dress I owned, a faded purple shift I had found months ago in the donation bin behind the thrift store. I'd scrubbed it by hand in the library bathroom sink and let it dry in the breeze behind the church. The fabric was thin, but I held my head high. Candace had arranged for the meeting to be held at City Hall. The press might be there, she warned gently. Only if you're comfortable. I nodded. I wasn't comfortable, not one bit. But I wasn't going to hide anymore. I'd been kicked in the head and left in the dirt like trash, and somehow I was still here. That meant something. Reuben walked beside me down Main Street, and people who used to pretend I didn't exist parted to let us pass. Some whispered. Some stared. Some lowered their eyes. I didn't care. Let them look. Let them see the woman they'd ignored for years. I wanted every last one of them to remember this moment. City Hall was brighter than I remembered. I'd only been inside once before years ago to apply for assistance. I had been turned away by a man in a tie who never looked up from his computer. Today, though, was different. As I stepped into the chamber, I saw faces I didn't expect. The nurse from the meeting. The young college kid with the protest sign. A mother with a toddler on her hip. People I didn't know, but who knew me now. Candace met me at the front. She smiled, firm and reassuring. You ready? I nodded. My legs trembled, but my heart stood still. I was not here for revenge. I was here for truth. They gave me 5 minutes to speak. 5 minutes to tell the story that had nearly shattered me. When I stepped up to that podium, the microphone squeaked. I cleared my throat, and I looked straight into the faces of council members I'd never met, but who held power over every sidewalk I slept on. My name is Edna May, I began. I am 74 years old. I am a human being. Silence. Cameras clicked in the background. 2 weeks ago, I was kicked in the head by the owner of Branson's Bakes. Not because I threatened her, not because I committed a crime, but because I sat on the sidewalk and dared to exist where she didn't want to see me. The words felt like thunder in my chest. I gripped the podium tighter. This isn't just about me. It's about what we allow. It's about how easy it is for cruelty to wear an apron and smile while destroying someone's dignity. My voice broke. I paused. Then I looked up, eyes blazing. But I'm still here, and I won't be silent anymore. Applause broke out, not loud, but strong. Candace stood to my left, unmoving, her lips pressed into a line. The council chair cleared his throat. Thank you, Miss May, he said. We'll take your statement into the official record. We are deeply sorry for what happened to you. I almost laughed. Sorry, that word was too small, too safe. But I nodded. I'd said what I came to say. Let the words echo. As I stepped down, a man stood near the aisle. Tall, white balding, in a blue tie. He extended a hand. I'm Mark Devon, he said. District Attorney's Office. I'd like to speak with you about potential charges. I blinked. Charges against her. He nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. We're opening a file. There's video evidence, witnesses, and, frankly, public pressure is building. Public pressure. 2 words that had once meant nothing to me. Now they were fire under the boots of the powerful. When I walked out of City Hall, the air felt different. The clouds had broken and sunlight poured across the steps like some holy spotlight. I saw cameras, reporters, microphones. I saw my face on a flyer someone was holding justice for Edna. I almost couldn't believe it. I'd been a ghost in this town for years, and now I was someone they couldn't ignore. That night, Sheila Branson made a statement of her own. It aired on Channel 5 during the 6 p.m. news. She stood in front of her bakery surrounded by her carefully chosen employees, young, white, polite. She didn't apologize. There's been a misunderstanding, she said, her voice cool and controlled. We've always supported our community. We believe in safety and order. Unfortunately, some individuals have taken to spreading misinformation that threatens small businesses. Misinformation. That was the word she chose. Not attack, not violence, not homeless woman I kicked like a dog. No. She called it noise, a distraction. And the worst part, some people believed her. The next morning, someone poured bleach on my sleeping bag. I found it soaked and ruined behind the dumpster, the smell choking. A sign taped to the alley wall said, "No more lies. Get out." My hands shook as I peeled it off. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just picked up my phone. I filmed it. I sent the video to Reuben, to Candace, to the news station. By noon, it was online. By 3, it was trending. By sunset, people were outside Branson's Bakes with signs, "Protect the vulnerable. We see you, Edna." I didn't organize it. I didn't plan it. But they came anyway. Gloria called me that night. "They're scared," she said. "They're trying to spin this, make you look unstable. But it's not working." I hung up the phone and stared at the stars. For the first time in years, I let myself hope. Not just for justice, but for change. The morning the bakery's windows were covered with protest flyers, I stood across the street watching strangers defend me with more courage than I ever knew I had. Cardboard signs rose like shields. No justice, no croissants. Edna deserves better, we saw the video. The line that once curled around the block for Sheila's sugar-dusted eclairs was now just 3 customers deep, each one greeted not with the smell of pastries, but with chants and camera phones. I didn't start this war, but I was learning how to stand inside it. A young man approached me on the sidewalk. He couldn't have been more than 25, scruffy beard messenger bag, wide eyes full of recognition. "Are you Edna May?" he asked. I nodded warily. He reached into his bag and handed me a folded newspaper. There I was on the front page. The headline screamed, "Kicked and Forgotten, the Face of Our City's Cruelty." I stared at it for a long moment. I had spent years being nothing to most people. And now, my face was everywhere. "You're the reason I came down here," he said. "I used to work for Sheila. I quit last year. She's not who she pretends to be." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" He glanced over his shoulder. "She told us to throw away any food we didn't sell, even if it was fresh. If we tried to donate it, we got written up. Said it encouraged loitering." His jaw clenched. "She said people like you were a stain on her storefront." My hands curled into fists, not out of surprise, but recognition. I'd always known her disgust, but hearing it spoken aloud, that made it real in ways bruises never could. That afternoon, Candace called. "City Council is voting to open a public inquiry," she said. "If it passes, you'll be called to testify. Under oath." I paused. "Will she be there?" "She'll have to be," Candace replied. "It's going to get ugly. Are you ready?" I looked down at my hands, calloused, cracked, but steady. "Yes," I said. "I've been ready since she raised her foot." The inquiry was scheduled for Friday. On Wednesday night, someone tried to bribe me. He showed up around midnight, well-dressed, nervous, and clearly not used to alleyways. "Ms. Edna," he whispered. "My name's Alan. I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Branson. She's concerned this has gone too far. She wants to make it right." He handed me an envelope. There's money inside. Enough to get you off the street. She's even offering a bus ticket out of town. A fresh start. I didn't open it. And all I have to do, I asked, is disappear. He didn't answer. I handed the envelope back. "Tell her I said thank you," I said, "but I've already started something, and I plan on finishing it." He left without another word. 2 hours later, a brick shattered the church window above the cot I sometimes slept on. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Go quietly or get hurt again. Only this time, I wasn't alone. Thursday morning, Pastor Derek gave me a new cot, a new blanket, and a vow, "They come for you again, they come through us." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the pews, hands folded, staring up at the cross. Not out of religion, but ritual, strength, reflection. I thought about my daughters, my grandson, the photo I still carried worn and creased tucked into the lining of my coat. I hadn't seen them in years. Maybe they'd hear about this. Maybe they'd see me. Maybe somewhere they'd be proud. The next day the city chambers were packed. Protesters outside, reporters on the steps. The inquiry had become an event. And at the center of it all, me. Edna May. The woman in the footage. The woman with the cardboard sign. The woman who'd refused to disappear. Sheila arrived 15 minutes late. She wore white, pearls, hair done up in tight curls that looked sprayed into place. Her face was stiff smug, but I saw the tremble in her hands. Good, I was called first. They asked me to recount what happened. I told them everything, from the sidewalk sweeping to the kick, from the bleach to the bribe. Every detail, every indignity. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I let the truth do the shouting. When I finished, silence fell over the room like fog. Then came the questions from the counsel, from the DA's office, even from the press. Do you believe this was targeted because of your race, your poverty, or both? I didn't blink. Yes. Why now? Why speak up? Because silence almost killed me, and I'm tired of dying quietly. Then it was Sheila's turn. She took the stand with all the fake grace she could muster. I never meant harm, she said. I was trying to protect my business. That area has been unsafe for months. I acted out of frustration, not hatred. They played the video, again. The sound of her boot, the thud, my cry. She winced, but she didn't apologize. Then someone asked, "Did you offer Ms. Edna money to leave the city?" Her face drained of color. No comment. The room buzzed. Someone gasped. Another councilwoman scribbled something rapidly. That was the moment the room shifted. The DA stood. "We recommend formal charges of misdemeanor assault and civil harassment. We are also opening an investigation into unlawful eviction tactics targeting homeless individuals." The gavel came down, and Sheila Branson, once Queen of Main Street, was no longer untouchable. As she left the chamber, someone threw flour at her car. It coated her windshield like snow. She didn't come back the next day, or the one after. But I did, and this time I stood outside Branson's Bakes not to protest, but to witness. The building was empty, closed. A sign hung on the door, "Under investigation." The town wasn't healed yet, but the silence had been broken, and I had become the woman they couldn't erase. After the inquiry, the town changed, but not all at once. Some folks still crossed the street when they saw me. Some whispered behind closed windows, but others more than before nodded when they passed. Some even smiled, and that was new. There were still nights when I didn't sleep, still mornings when hunger clawed my belly like a wild dog. But something had shifted in the air, something I couldn't see but could feel respect. I became Ms. Edna to people who'd never looked me in the eye before. I didn't ask for it. I didn't demand it. It came because I stood when I could have stayed on the ground, because I told the truth when it would have been easier to disappear. And then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered to the church office by a woman in a brown coat with tear tracks on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said to Pastor Derek. "Please, give this to her." She never gave her name. The envelope was soft old, lined with gold thread around the edges. I opened it slowly. The paper inside smelled faintly of lavender. It was from my oldest daughter Lorraine. "Dear Mama, I saw you on the news. I couldn't believe it at first. You look so strong and so tired. I'm sorry for the silence, for leaving you alone. I thought I was protecting my family, but I see now I was just afraid of the truth. If you're willing, I'd like to come see you. I miss your hands. I miss your voice. Love, Lorraine." My knees buckled. Pastor Derek caught me before I hit the floor. I read the letter a dozen times that night, each word a balm, each curve of her handwriting a resurrection of a bond I thought had long since died. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I just waited. 2 days later she came. She stood at the gates of the church shelter, wrapped in a wool coat, her hair pulled into the same tight bun she wore in high school. Her eyes were red, but her hands were steady. She looked older than I remembered. I probably looked ancient to her. "Mama," she whispered. "Baby," I said. And then we fell into each other. No speeches, no explanations. Just arms and warmth and years of silence breaking like glass on the sidewalk. She stayed for hours, brought food, blankets, clean socks. She asked about everything. I told her only some. I didn't want to relive it all, not yet. But I showed her the library where I'd learned to fight, the sidewalk where I'd bled, the alley where I'd dreamed of dying but chose instead to rise. "You don't belong out here," she said. "I know," I said, "but this isn't where the story ends." That night I returned to the bakery. It had remained closed since the inquiry. The windows were still papered over the sidewalk, cracked from years of ignored upkeep. Someone had spray-painted "Truth Lives Here" on the brick. And below it, someone else had added, "So does Edna." I stood there for a long while, staring at the place where I had once been struck like trash. Then I turned and walked toward the community hall. Reuben had called an emergency meeting. Tonight, he said, we talk future. The room was full when I arrived. People I'd never seen before. College students, grandparents, restaurant workers, even a retired judge who had come just to listen. At the front, Reuben handed me a piece of paper. "This," he said, "is for you." It was a proposal. The city, under public pressure, had agreed to open a pilot program for homeless rehabilitation funded by grants run by the community. They needed a figurehead, someone trusted, someone symbolic. They wanted me. "I ain't no politician," I muttered. "You're better," Gloria said. "You're living proof." They named it the Purple Dress Project. Not for royalty, not for fashion, but for the dress I wore the day I stood at that podium. A week later, I moved into a temporary apartment provided by the church. Clean sheets, a door that locked, a real pillow. Lorraine helped me pick out new clothes. She said, "We're not hiding our scars anymore." I wore the same purple dress at the press conference announcing the program's launch. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But All I said was this: I used to believe no one saw me. Now I know when you speak the truth, even the dark will listen. And it did. Sheila Branson was eventually charged not just with assault, but with obstruction and bribery. Her bakery license was revoked, her assets frozen. She sold the building within the month and left town. No one threw a parade. No one mourned. The clipboard, the pearls, the power, all gone. But this story wasn't about her anymore. It was about us. A city that had been sleepwalking now waking up. A sidewalk once cold, now lined with blankets and hands outstretched in help, not hatred. A woman once broken, now unbreakable. Me, Edna May, the woman in the purple dress. By spring, the street where I once begged was blooming. The cracks in the pavement were still there. Some wounds don't vanish with time, but flower beds lined the sidewalk now planted by the hands of the same community that once walked past me without a glance. I stood at the corner near what used to be Branson's Bakes, now boarded up and tagged with a mural me in that purple dress painted with brush strokes of fire and grace. Above my head the words, "Dignity doesn't beg. It demands." I stared at that mural for hours the first time I saw it. The artist, a shy girl named Lena who used to skate past me with headphones in, told me she'd painted it after watching my interview go viral. I wanted kids to know your face, she said. Not for what they did to you, but for how you got back up. Word had spread. Not just around town, but beyond. National media picked up the story, "Homeless Grandma Becomes Voice for Change." Donations poured into the Purple Dress Project sleeping bags, hot meals, even job training sessions hosted by downtown businesses that once turned people like me away at the door. And the city, under pressure and pride, passed a new ordinance: no business could remove a person from public space without cause. Harassment of the unhoused would now carry a fine and jail time for repeat offenders. I became the face of a movement I didn't ask for, but I wore it like armor. There were speaking events, interviews, marches. I stood on stages with mayors and ministers and mothers who'd lost everything. I held microphones with hands that once clutched tin cups. And each time I spoke, I remembered the silence, the brick wall, the cold sidewalk, the taste of blood after that kick, and I made sure no one in that crowd ever forgot it. But there were nights when the noise faded, and I lay in my own bed, warm, yes, but alone, and wondered what came next. Was I a symbol now? Or just a woman who'd survived one bad day, louder than most? It was Lorraine who grounded me. She'd moved to the city not long after the inquiry, got a job at a clinic, brought my grandson Terrence to meet me one Sunday after church. He was taller than I imagined, voice deeper. But when he looked at me, he still called me Granny E. And that's when I broke. Not during the trial, not during the protests, but right there in that church hallway with a child's voice calling me home. One afternoon, Lorraine and I sat on a park bench near the community garden the project had funded. Volunteers bustled around us planting seeds, handing out water bottles to folks still living in tents. "You could retire now," she teased. "Live in peace." I smiled. "Peace isn't what I want," I said. "Peace is a luxury people like me were never given. What I want, what I fight for, is permanence." She tilted her head. "You're gonna have to explain that." I looked around at the garden, the murals, the smiling volunteers. "People forget easy," I said. "They move on, rebuild, rebrand. But what happened on that sidewalk can't be scrubbed away like graffiti. I want the next woman who lays her head on concrete to know she's not invisible. I want the next man who's kicked when no one's watching to know the world can change if we stay loud long enough. That night I wrote my first op-ed. Candace helped me edit it. It ran in the Sunday paper under the headline, "You Kicked Me Down." I stood for all of us. It ended with a message I still believe. The sidewalk wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of yours. So rise, speak, and never let silence become your shelter. Soon after, I got a call from the state capitol. They were organizing a summit on homelessness and public safety. They wanted me to be the keynote speaker. Your story has become a blueprint, they said. We want to hear it from the source. I packed my bag. I brought the purple dress. When I stood at that podium, I looked out at a sea of decision-makers, people who'd never known hunger or fear or the cold of concrete under their ribs. I didn't lecture. I didn't plead. I told the story, not just of the kick, but of the silence, the awakening, the mural, the girl with the brush, the letter from my daughter, the moment I stopped begging to be seen and started demanding to be heard. And I ended with this: I was homeless, but I was never hopeless. You can kick a woman in the head. You can try to erase her. But when the truth stands back up, cities move. The crowd rose. Not for me, but for every Edna they had ever ignored. That night, I received a standing invitation to speak at schools across the state. They called it the Purple Dress Assembly. I called it redemption. And still, I came home every night to the same small apartment. Same coffee mug. Same Bible on the nightstand I barely read but always kept. Because somewhere in those worn-out pages was a story just like mine of suffering, of survival, of justice finally catching up to power. I was not done, not by a long shot. The final chapter of this story didn't begin with a bang or a gavel or a headline. It began with silence. A long, golden silence on a summer morning as I stood in the exact same spot where I'd once been kicked in the head like garbage, staring at the bronze plaque now cemented into the sidewalk. It was small, simple, but powerful. It read, "In honor of Edna May, who stood when the world looked away, whose voice moved a city, whose courage made her unforgettable. People passed by. Some paused to read it. Some laid flowers. One child, maybe 7, bent down, touched the metal, and whispered to his mother, 'That's the lady in the painting.' His mother nodded and said, 'She made the world safer.' I turned away before they could see my tears. The city had changed, yes, but that wasn't the victory. The real victory was that I had changed it. That day, the mayor herself invited me to City Hall. Not for a hearing, not for a protest, but for a ceremony. The official unveiling of a new initiative, Edna's Law. A piece of legislation that made it a criminal offense to harass, assault, or forcibly remove unhoused individuals from public spaces without cause. And for the first time in state history, the law bore the name of the very person it was created to protect. They handed me the first printed copy. Thick, weighty, symbolic. I stared at my name on that cover and thought about all the years I was nameless. Erased, whispered about, avoided. I thought of every shelter floor I'd slept on. Every rainstorm I'd curled into myself, every bruise real and invisible. And I thought of Sheila Branson wherever she was now, maybe still denying, maybe still bitter, maybe finally silent. When the mayor handed me the microphone, I took a moment to breathe. "I'm not supposed to be here," I said, my voice steady. I was supposed to disappear, to be swept up, tossed out, forgotten. But I didn't vanish. I rose. I looked around that room, packed with city leaders, activists, students, neighbors, and strangers who'd once passed me without seeing me. I don't speak for the homeless, I said. I speak for the ignored, for the dismissed, for the ones this world taught to believe they were less than human. Let this law be more than a statute. Let it be a promise that dignity has no zip code. Applause roared. But this time it wasn't just noise. It was recognition. Later that evening, back at the church garden, the community held a potluck in my honor. Lorraine was there glowing in a yellow sundress. Terence played guitar with a group of volunteers by the mural. Pastor Derek prayed softly over the food. Gloria passed around homemade pies, and Reuben, dear Reuben, toasted with the sweetest tea I'd ever tasted. I want y'all to remember, he said, this started because one woman refused to stay down. And because of her, our city remembers who it is. I stood there, surrounded by laughter and light and life, and I felt something I hadn't known in decades home. Not four walls, not furniture, but belonging. Before the night ended, a little girl came up to me. Big eyes, brown skin, braided hair. She handed me a drawing stick figures on a sidewalk. One figure wore a purple triangle dress and had stars in her hair. "That's you," she said. "You're a superhero." I bent down, touched her cheek, and whispered, "So are you, baby?" And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just a survivor. I was a beginning for a city that had been cold and cruel, but now, because of truth, courage, and one woman who refused to disappear, was learning how to love again. So, if you ever walk down Main Street and see a plaque on the sidewalk or a mural painted in hues of purple and flame, stop for a moment. Think of the woman who once slept there. Think of the silence that was broken. Think of the city that stood still so it could learn to stand tall. And if you're ever told you're too small, too poor, too late, or too old to matter, remember me. I am Edna May. I was kicked, but I got back up, and I changed the world. What happened to me could have been the end, but instead it became the beginning, not just of my second chance, but of a city's awakening. They kicked me like I was trash, but I stood back up like I was truth. And through pain, protest, and perseverance, I proved one thing. Your worth isn't measured by your wallet, your address, or the dirt on your clothes. It's measured by your courage to speak when others stay silent. Dignity isn't something they can give you. It's something you claim, even if you have to claim it from the ground. If this story moved, you don't scroll past. Comment below. What would you have done if you saw that kick? Like if you believe no one deserves to be treated as invisible. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories that prove the human spirit never stays down. And remember, sometimes the most powerful people are the ones they tried to erase.